The boomers, we call people born after World War II. These baby boomers were, yes, looking for something small, but they did have specific things in mind when they looked at a car. And oh, by the way, nobody was making it. The car companies needed someone with vision. They needed someone who had connected with the generation and were listening to them and could come up with the formula that would really draw these people in.
When these Mustangs were introduced, there was nothing else out there on the market.
From the late 50s to the mid 60s, it was ripe for someone to deliver a package that connected with people.
At the end of World War II, when our GIs returned from the war in Europe, they brought with them fond memories of sports cars that they had seen and driven. And when they came to this country, they realized that they didn't have a car like that. So there was a demand in the late 40s to build that kind of a car.
The late 50s, early 60s were the heyday of domestic auto production. We had big behemoth cars, the large fins, lots of chrome. The car companies were one-upping each other for trying to make something so stylish. But essentially, these cars were very big. They were powered by very large engines, V8 engines. And with gasoline not an issue, it was no problem to own a big Luxo cruiser. So it was quite a change as we entered into the 60s, where young people started to influence purchase decisions. They didn't want Grandpa's big old Chrysler. That's the way they felt in the 60s. So young people were looking for something completely different that was a polar opposite of what was on the highway. The 60s were turbulent. More and more young people really wanted to distance themselves from what they called the establishment. So compacts and even mid-sizes were the only thing they were gravitating to. These baby boomers wanted something they could connect with, and style, practicality, design, price. It wasn't one thing that pushed their buttons. They needed something that would fit all of these little needs and wants all in the same package. They could get some of that in the car market that was out there, but they couldn't get all of it. So they were actually looking for something. The general buying public wanted to be young. So what was happening was that big car, that thing that we grew up on, that big family car, a family wagon, we were starting to migrate away and get into smaller, more stylish, something a little bit more personal. Not something you'd see 30 of them on the road. You wanted something that you personally could connect with.
Gentlemen, this country of ours is unique in one very important respect. We're the only nation in the world where practically every family has its own transportation system.
In 1960, Lee Iacocca was in a position to become a vice president at Ford. He always had in the back of his mind a four-seat sporty car concept. And now he was in a position where he could expand on that. He created a committee that became known as the Fairlane Committee, and these were heads of different departments of Ford, and they all operated clandestinely with this little committee because they didn't want Henry Ford to know that they were trying to come up with a new concept car.
So they had their meetings at the Glass House up here on Michigan Avenue. But then they decided, well, we're going to do something different. So to do that, they left work, drove down Michigan Avenue to a hotel called the Fairlane Hotel. They would bring carryouts in and work at the conference room from 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, sometimes to 9, 10 in the evening.
They had to build a concept that would appeal across the board.
But in the back of their heads, they wanted to do something really different and special. These guys wanted to really connect with that customer that they believed was going to be emerging in the 60s. The idea that was being promoted was to do something called the Special Falcon. But there was a problem with the Falcon. And the Falcon was, it's a nice little car, it had a V8, it had 4 places, but Grandma bought it. When your grandmother bought a Falcon, and when it was the compact car, when it was looked upon by the rest of society as an economy car, is it cool to drive an economy car? Probably not.
So the Fairlane Committee explored various concepts on how to develop a car that could have 4 seats, be sporty. They wanted it to be a ladies' car. They wanted it to be a teenager's car. They wanted it to be a car to go to church on Sunday. They wanted it to be a car you could go to the racetrack in. So there were many different ways that they wanted this car to be developed. There was a fellow that worked for Lee Iacocca. His name was Hal Sperlich. Hal Sperlich was the one that realized Henry Ford wasn't going to give him any kind of money in the budget to build the car. So they would have to come up with an existing platform that was going to be relatively economical from a development standpoint of view. Henry Ford was pretty much kept in the dark in regards to this new concept, simply because they had just finished the Edsel debacle and they lost $250 million on the Edsel.
The Edsel was focus group to death, and what happened to the car was it bombed. Henry II, who was then put in charge of the company, was very leery of any newfangled ideas. So he just thought, stay the course, make the products we know that people are buying. One of the Fairlane Committee's biggest things was to go back to the Fairlane Committee and Lee sitting down saying, Henry will not give us the money. Why? Well, for 1965, every Ford was redesigned. There's no money left. There's only like maybe $18, $17 million in the entire kitty. Can we build this car for 17 or 18 million? Part of Lee Iacocca's genius, when he was thrown out of Henry Ford's office for the 6th time, asking for this funding to build this specialty car. Henry didn't like it. He used to call it the special, just make the Falcon. We already have the Falcon. And Lee tried to explain to him, I know we have the Falcon, Henry, and I know that, but we want something different, and here's why we want it. Well, when he was thrown out of his office, he was told that don't come back here unless you can prove it was sell. Lee Iacocca looked at the agency guys, the ad guys, and he said, well, we're gonna need some research. So that next week, when Lee and Don Fry and Sperlich walked into Henry Ford, here's all this research. Look, this amount of boomers are in the market right now looking for a specialty car. This amount of boomers have money. And Henry looked at it and said, I'll give you your effing money. Get out of my effing office, and this effing thing better sell. The idea of Mustang 1 came about very early.
The two-seat concept car was actually put together by a design team. Roy Lunn was the fellow. He was actually a British designer from Aston Martin that had come to Ford, and he was given the task of coming up with this original two-seat concept car. And Roy Lunn worked with John Najar.
And John was tasked with coming up with something really cool they could build a prototype of, something totally unique, different. One of the young designers in his group was a guy named Phil Clark.
Phil Clark was actually an artist who had come to Ford from General Motors, and he provided some input into the design of that car.
Because when Phil drove out to California to start his designing career at General Motors, he was driving across the plains and he saw running Mustangs out in the wild, just wild horses galloping. As he was driving along this lonely highway, getting out to California through the mountains, he got to the hotel and sketched a galloping horse. And this is where we have the Mustang, the 3-bar logo, red, white, and blue, how American this was, the freedom of the plains to run free. And he put it on a sketching piece of paper and dated it.
They used that emblem on that original Mustang 1.
Now, on John Najar's task list was to not only come up with a design, but a name for this design. So John Najar was an aviator. He loved airplanes. His favorite plane in World War II was the P-51 Mustang.
The conversation went like this. Bob McGuire said, we need a name for the horse. Najar said, why don't we call it the Mustang? And we'll name it after the P-51 airplane. And Bob McGuire said, no, I don't want to do that because it's too airplane-y. The airplane-y being a symbolism for, no, this isn't going to work. This is a car. Well, then John Najar quickly came back and he said, but we can name it after the equestrian version of a real horse. And Bob McGuire said, that works, and that sounds really good.
Well, they built a couple of these cars. They took it out to the race course, had Dan Gurney drive it in New York.
This is the spirit of the wild Mustang, bred into a fine machine. There is only one, but it has spurred inquiry and comment from across the nation and from many other parts of the world.
Young people loved it. Oh, how cool is this car? This Mustang 1.
The Mustang pulls up in front of the Student Union and is engulfed by students who are seeing the car for the first time. As everywhere, they are full of questions. Want to know all about a car they had only heard about. The features of the car are explained, starting with the twin exhausts that go through the rear body shell. The Mustang emblem is also the latch that releases the rear deck lid. Derived from the new German Ford Taunus 12M engine, this road version has a single carburetor. The radiator scoops are located at high pressure areas on the body. The cockpit has a complete set of color-coded instruments in its padded dash, including tachometer, oil pressure gauge, ammeter, and water temperature indicator. The steering wheel has 3 inches of fore and aft adjustment. For the cleanest possible front entry, the headlights swing through 180 degrees for night, a legal height above the road. Go flush for daylight driving. Similarly, the license plate can be flipped down for normal driving or folded away for racing.
Also set the scene with Lee Iacocca knowing darn well, I'm never going to be able to sell a 2-place mid-engine sports car in any great numbers. This was a teaser. It was an advertising bait and switch. Show them this cool car, get them excited about this Mustang name, Ford's Mustang.
Gail Halderman, 10:30 at night, at his kitchen table, drew a design of this so-called concept car became named Mustang. It was his design that he drew that evening. It was posted on the bulletin board next morning, and his boss, Joe Oros, agreed to use that design to develop the car.
A lot of people in the design world tried to come up with ideas. Iacocca thought the idea of a competition would be great. He knew darn well what he wanted. He already saw Joe's car. But he said, okay, we're gonna have a contest. But it was Lee's way of including everyone, even though he knew in his head, and so did Joe Oros, and so did Hal Sperlich, what they wanted to do.
The fellows in the design department was able to develop a clay model. And Mr. Iacocca looked at the car and he said, this is it, this is the car. So they made a call to Henry Ford and they brought him over and they said, this is what we've been talking about. And Henry looked at it and he said, you do what you think you have to do. And as soon as he left, Iacocca turned to his cohorts and said, we got it. Mr. Iacocca decided they needed to put something out there that had a little more teeth to the concept and they could show to the people and develop into what became the final Mustang product. So that Mustang 2, the 4-seat prototype, was used again at Watkins Glen in the fall of 1963 to tease the people and see what their reaction was to the car.
That car, when it was shown at the auto show as Mustang 2, was the one that Lee knew if we can take their temperature. Yeah, it was a bait and switch, but would they like this? If you'll notice, when you look at Mustang 1 and then Mustang 2, the concept car, same color, white, had the same bullet nose, had the same blue stripe down the center, but all of a sudden, instead of a unique platform mid-engine 2-seat sports car, it was a 4-place car based on the Ford Falcon.
What most people don't know is that when the Mustang 2, which was this first 4-seat prototype, was built, the final plans for the real 1965 Mustang, the 4-seat version that we know today, had already been finally approved in September of 1962. This 1963 Mustang 2, even though it was a prototype car, it was meant to test the waters. It was not meant to do anything else because the real production Mustang had already been designed and it was in the process of being taken into the manufacturing phase. They wanted to have it done in time for the New York World's Fair in 1964 for one specific reason. New car models came out typically in the fall. And if you introduced a new car mid-year, you would gather all the press for your new car and you wouldn't have to worry about the other manufacturers stealing the limelight with their cars. So they knew that the World's Fair would be a perfect timing point to bring out this car. So from September 10th of 1962, the goal was to have a car available for the 1964 World's Fair in April.
Totally unique way of launching a car in the middle of April, never been done before. At a large, public fair with a world stage. This wasn't the New York Fair. This was the World's Fair. So there would be a world media audience there.
Across the Bridge of Nations is the transportation area with Ford Motor Company's Pavilion, one of the largest and most popular exhibits at the fair, and showcase for the products and ideas of the worldwide enterprise that is Ford today.
The coolest thing about all of this is that how are we going to reveal it? Because the World's Fair, yeah, it was in the paper, it was in the New York Times. Well, let's do something. Let's buy television advertising, but let's all have it on the night before on all 3 networks at the same time. No matter what channel you were watching, you were going to get hit.
Well, the planets were all in perfect alignment for this to happen.
They had the stage to themselves.
Coming April 17th, the unexpected, the new Ford Mustang. Brilliant new kind of car. Mustang is the one car that's designed to be designed by you. Mustang is only days away.
One of the advertising slogans that Ford used was, "It's a car designed to be designed by you." And what they meant by that was that we're going to give you a base car, but we're going to give you so many options that you can put any or all of these options on the car to suit your own personal needs.
Never before was the car given to you as a palette and said, here, look at all these colors. What color would you like? All colors of the rainbow. It's not just 4 or 5 colors.
If you didn't like the bucket seats, you could buy a bench seat.
All cars will have standard carpeting in it. It goes up to the windowsills, not just on the floor.
There was a 4-speed floor shift. There was an automatic transmission floor shift.
You were going to have full hubcaps.
There were 3 different kinds and shapes of hubcaps.
Full wheel covers, not just the caps over the center.
A transistorized radio, which went into a little bit later an AM/FM radio.
I can get a convertible or a coupe. I can get this color with a 6-cylinder or a V8.
Power convertible tops, manual convertible tops, different axle ratios for mileage.
These were things that were typically reserved for options or luxury cars. But here is an entry-level car that you can come in and say, you know what? I want this different interior. I have different interiors.
It's been said that there were so many options available on these original cars that you could very rarely find 2 cars that were exactly the same.
When you bring in the freedom of your own personal choices and your own personal taste and let Ford design that car for you, you can pretty much have what you want.
A lot of the advertising that was originally done on the Mustang was aimed at women because women were wanting a car that was easy to handle, economical on gas, and looked good and sporty for them to be in.
There was a problem with women buyers originally because when guy buyers got in there, they wanted the V8. And women really didn't care. They wanted the fuel efficiency. Women are much smarter than guys. They're thinking with their pocket. So they said, you know what? I'll buy the 6-cylinder. So the ad guys were asked, can you get women to come in and push the 6-cylinder? They'll buy the 6 if we advertise it. Well, a movie back then, I think was maybe 66, Sex and the Single Girl. So Ford ad guys twisted it, made it 6 and the Single Girl. They wanted to show you that if you're a single girl, get the 6-cylinder, you'll have money, you can go out and look cool, but the 6-cylinder is what you want. There was the thing called the Mustang Pledge. Take the Mustang Pledge. I promise not to buy something that looks dorky. Mustang hit the button because of ad guys. It was something that you could personalize. They thought it was going to be a youth market car, and that's all who would buy it. Boomers. But what they didn't count on is, well, oh, guess what? If you're a bookkeeper and you're 50 years old, you want to be youthful too. Well, wait a minute, if that's so cool, why can't I be cool? These are all classic Mustang commercials. And there was the bookkeeper, the little stodgy bookkeeper guy with the pencil pusher with his glasses, but when he got into his Mustang, he went roaring off and spinning the tire. This was your way to escape your reality and be young and vibrant and good looking, no matter who you were. The boomers, did they love it? Sure, it was a young guy's car, young girl's car, but everyone loved it because everybody wanted to capture this essence of youth. It was the fountain of youth. When you bring in the freedom of your own personal choices and your own personal taste and let Ford design that car for you, you can pretty much have what you want. Ford, on purpose, launched this car with the convertible and the coupe at the same time because they wanted this choice. But they saw that the cars that really got the GI's hearts beating over in Europe were the Ferraris with the fastbacks, that glass window, those early Ferraris, those Porsches. If we could make Mustang have a fastback like a Ferrari or Porsche and come to market with that right away, that was even cooler than the coupe.
The public went for it immediately. It was something that they had been led to the water trough. And when the doors opened, boy, they were ready. They sold 22,000 cars in the very first day.
Mustang sales that first year were so phenomenal, it established this is an all-new market. We could not build them fast enough.
In the first year, they ended up actually selling 417,000 cars.
Everybody flocked to their dealership, and stories of people waiting in line at dealerships for them to open. There's been really nothing like it since. So the reaction was unheard of. Lee had a problem the minute Mustang came out. Mustang had a small V8 at 289, and at the same time, muscle cars were approaching the scene. And the guys from the racing department came in and said, Lee, brakes are lousy for a racetrack. It doesn't have enough power. You have no credibility. Well, Carroll Shelby was a chicken farmer in Texas, and he decided that's just a lousy way to make a living, so he went racing. He had a real knack for racing. So he went over to Ford Motor Company. He said, yeah, I'd like some of your V8 engines, and I'm going to put them in these little British sports cars and go racing. And Ford said, what for? He goes, well, I want to beat Corvettes. You want to beat Corvettes? Oh, how many engines would you need? Because they had nothing that could beat a Corvette. It was a real sports car. Our Thunderbird was a Luxo cruiser. If you want to beat Corvettes, here's some Ford engines. So Ford delivered these Mustangs to Carroll Shelby's shop out in California, and he took these cars, changed the suspensions, ripped out the back suspension, changed the geometry, completely gutted the engine and made it more powerful, different cylinder heads, carburetor, intake manifold, race headers, stripped out the back seat, no sound insulation, made a pure race car out of these. He called them GT 350s. This Mustang that was a secretary's car is now a road course winner. It's a winner on the track. How do you market that? How do you get a race car in the hands of a young professional without him going to a racetrack? Well, you make them and you call them the Hertz edition and you put them in the rental lot. The GT350H for Hertz. They made a limited number. So now young professionals could go on their business trip and instead of renting the boring sedan, could rent this race car.
It's an American classic for several different reasons. It had continental styling, long hood, short trunk, and low slump. If you want to compare it to Harley Davidson, for instance, it's almost like a cult following. People have been brought up with this car. They've been in families. There are owners that bought these cars new that still have them. In my case, my own children grew up with the Mustang and were raised in the car. The true significance of this car is that not only is it the first pre-production Mustang hardtop, but this particular car is the one that started the pony car revolution in the United States. This is the first one in a hardtop version that was built. Over the years, I've probably owned 8 or 10 different Mustangs. I've worked on a lot of different ones with different friends and so forth. But my favorite probably is this car right here. This is a 66 GT Convertible. This is an original car, and it's the way it came out of the factory. Colors, interior, everything is exactly right. Because it's a GT, it has fog lights in the grille. We have Mustang GT emblem and the name Mustang down low with a white stripe on the car. It also has style steeled wheels. This has a pony interior, as it's commonly referred to, and it differs from the standard car in that it has an embossed stripe across the seat here with horses emblazoned into it. This car has what's called a rally pack, which is a tachometer and clock that are attached to the steering column, rather. It doesn't have a console. Most of these cars have consoles, but for whatever reason, the original owner decided not to have one in this car.
In your lifetime, you have certain products that you grow up with and you can relate to. You don't have to ever have owned a Mustang to have a Mustang story. Because I know you know someone that had a Mustang, either it was your boyfriend in school or girlfriend at college or your grandmother. You've grown up with them. They're part of America. And because this car has somehow connected with us, because it meant freedom, because it meant mobility, which is the key to our freedom, it gives us a feeling of being young and youthful. And for a moment to just let your cares go away and feel the rush of air in a convertible or the power of a V8, because it has such a following, because it's not a car anymore, it's a community of people. It's a way to have a friendship with a product that relates to you on a totally different level. It's a great American product, it's a great American brand. You can still have that freedom, and I still love to be an individual in a mass society, and I think that's why Mustang's so special.
This is a 1968 Shelby Mustang GT500 KR. I've owned this since 1971.
He had the car in the garage, and we pulled up in his house. There was a work van, there was a date car, and I was like, you got all these vehicles, what do you got in the garage? It was about 6 months before I finally heard what was in there.
1966 Mustang Ford convertible. It's called original candy apple red. It is the original color. I remember when they first came out when I wasn't exactly a kid, but I know at that time I couldn't afford one.
I bought this car in March of 2003. Did a little restoration on it in order to get it in the present condition.
It's a 1965 Ford Mustang convertible. I bought it 4 years ago in Chicago, drove it home on Route 66 with my dad. It was originally a secretary's car. That was the market. It's the only car I've ever wanted. Read the Nancy Drew book. She had a convertible blue Mustang, so it was fate.
My mom and dad went to the opening day to see the Mustang. When my dad comes home, he comes and calls me up and says, hey, son, we need to go look at one of these new Mustang cars. And I said, what's that? And so he broke out a page of Reader's Digest, which I still have on the wall in my museum in Havasu. And I looked at it, and we went down and I ordered this car. I paid $2,986 for this car. on September the 18th, 1964. It's got 53,000 original miles on it.
Well, my son was hurt in a car accident, and he was in a coma for 4.5 months, and I kept telling him that if he ever got to where he could function, I would buy whatever car he wanted.
I've always loved old Mustangs. You know, most of them just have stamped ponies on. Around ours, the lights up. Only 500 were ever made.
We found it at an auction, and it was really not in good shape. When it was originally built, this car only cost $2,600, and it was the poor man's sports car at the time. You can order almost whatever you want on it. You could get it as bare bones as you want or as nice as you want.
People that would drive by or look at your car, well, they know automatically it's a Mustang. There is a recognition.
We didn't get it restored until his 50th birthday, and I had a surprise 50th birthday party for him.
You know, Lee had it right when he helped with the design of the car. It was comfortable to drive, it's basic.
It's just, it'll always be an American icon.
Yes, the Mustang turned out to be the kind of car that dreams are made of. For this car was created by engineers and stylists only to prove out the feasibility and desirability of certain new design features. A number of the advanced features represented in the Mustang, along with its performance and handling characteristics, proved out remarkably well.